The survey ship Odyssey was a small, quiet world of metal and light, hanging in an ocean of endless black. Outside its windows there were no stars, no bright galaxies. Here, in this part of space, there was only silence and dust. Below the ship, a planet turned slowly, a rusty red ball scarred with deep canyons and plains of gray sand. This was K-77b. Its official name was a long string of numbers and letters, but the crew called it the graveyard. Scans showed no water, no plants, no life. Not even a microbe. Something had killed this world a very, very long time ago. Inside the ship, the air was clean and cool. Captain Sue sat in her chair on the bridge, her eyes on the main screen showing the dead planet. She was a serious woman who always thought about rules and safety. This mission was simple. Map the surface, take mineral samples, confirm there was nothing of value or danger. A boring job, but a safe one. Anything from the surface? Sue asked, her voice calm. From a station behind her, a young man named Min looked up. He was the ship's engineer. His hands were often stained with grease, and he understood the ship's heart better than anyone. Power is stable. Life support is green. Jin is on his third survey point. No problems, Sue nodded. Good. The sooner we finish, the sooner we leave this quiet place. Down on the surface, the quiet was a heavy thing. Jin, the team's xenoarchaeologist, felt the weight of it through his suit. The sky was a dull orange, and the wind, what little there was, did nothing but push dust around. He was supposed to be taking soil samples, but his own scanner had picked up a different signal, a faint energy reading buried deep. It was probably nothing, just a strange mineral deposit. But Jin was bored, and his curiosity was a powerful thing. He followed the signal to a large, rocky cliff face. The signal was coming from inside. He used his tools to scan the rock. There was a hidden opening, covered by a landslide 1,000,000 years ago. Jin to Odyssey, he said, his voice crackling over the comms. Go ahead. Jin, Sue's voice replied, I've found something. A cave entrance buried. My scanner is picking up refined metals from inside. Artificial, not natural. There was a pause on the other end. Define artificial, Jin. I mean someone built it, Captain. A long time ago. Another pause, longer this time. Understood. Proceed with extreme caution. I'm sending your suit's bio readings to Hana. Any spike, any change, and you pull out. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Jin said, a small smile on his face. This was much more interesting than dirt. It took him an hour to clear enough rock to squeeze through. The tunnel behind was dark and perfectly round like a pipe. His helmet light cut through the darkness, showing walls that were smooth and hard. He walked for what felt like a long time, the tunnel sloping gently downward. Finally, it opened into a large, circular room. His light bounced around the chamber, and Jin's breath caught in his throat. The room was full of bones. They were not human bones. They were long and thin, with too many joints. Skeletons were slumped against the walls, curled on the floor. There were dozens of them. They were all of the same species, and they had all died here together. He moved his light slowly, his heart beating fast. This was a major find. The first proof of intelligent life in this sector, and a tragic one. He recorded everything, his voice a whisper as he described the scene. Then his light fell on a platform in the center of the room. There was a single figure there, sitting in a chair that seemed to be part of the floor. This skeleton was larger than the others, and it was wearing a suit of dark matte black armor, scarred and pitted from unimaginable use. On its head was a helmet. The helmet was unlike anything Jin had ever seen. It was angular and fierce with a T-shaped visor that was now dark. It looked heavy, built for war. While everything else in the room was covered in a thick layer of dust, the helmet was clean. It seemed to almost repel the dust of ages. Odyssey, you are not going to believe this, Jin whispered. Report, Jin. Sue's voice was tight with tension. I found them, the inhabitants. They're all dead, but one of them is different. It's wearing some kind of combat armor. And the helmet, it's intact. Perfectly intact. Do not touch it, Jin. Sue's command was immediate and sharp. Scan only. We have no idea what it is. Jin approached the seated figure. He felt a strange respect for it. This being had died at its post, surrounded by its people. He activated his full sensor suite. The armor was made of a complex metal alloy his scanner couldn't identify. The readings from the helmet were even stranger. Captain, the helmet is giving off a residual energy signature. It's faint, but it's there. It's not radioactive. It's more like a neural pattern. Like a brainwave. A brainwave? From a dead alien? Min's voice cut in from engineering on the ship. It's not active life, Jin clarified, his scientist's mind taking over. It's an echo. A recording. It's like the last thoughts of the wearer were imprinted into the helmet's matrix. That's a fascinating theory, Jin, a new, softer voice said. It was Hana, the ship's doctor. But it's also a massive biological unknown. We have no idea if that echo is safe. Please be careful, Jin circled the platform. He knew they were right. But the opportunity was too great. This was a voice from the past, a story waiting to be heard. The first story from another intelligent species, Captain, Jin said, making his case. This is the single greatest xenoarchaeological find in a century. We can't just leave it. We have to bring it back. Absolutely not, Sue replied. We have a strict non-contamination protocol. We do not bring unknown biological artifacts onto my ship. It's not biological, it's technological, Jin argued. We can seal it in a level 4 quarantine pod. No physical contact. We can run remote diagnostics. Imagine what we could learn. There was a long silence on the comms. Jin could almost hear Sue thinking, weighing the risk against the discovery. Jin. Hana's voice came through, concerned. Your heart rate and cortisol levels are elevated. You need to stay calm. I am calm, Jin said, though he wasn't. He was excited. Captain, this is why we came out here. To find answers. The answers are right here in this helmet. Back on the Odyssey, Sue looked at the faces of her crew on the bridge. Min looked curious. Hana, watching Jin's vitals on her screen, looked worried. Min, Sue said, can the quarantine bay hold something like this? Absolutely no chance of a breach. Min thought for a moment. The Q-bay is designed for unknown microbes and viruses. For a solid object? Yes. It has its own power, its own containment field. It's a floating box inside the ship. Nothing gets in or out without our say-so. Sue let out a long breath. She didn't like it. It felt like a mistake. But Jin was right. The purpose of exploration was to find things. Okay, she said finally. Jin, you're to package the artifact using full biocontainment procedures. Use the reinforced case. Do not, under any circumstances, make physical contact with the helmet. Is that understood? Understood, Captain, Jin said, a wave of triumph washing over him. I'll be careful. Inside the cavern, Jin worked with slow, precise movements. He opened the large padded case and placed it next to the chair. Using specialized tools, he carefully lifted the helmet. It was heavier than it looked. As he moved it, a fine black dust fell from its neck ring. For a split second, his gloved finger brushed against the inside of the helmet's rim. A jolt, like static electricity, shot up his arm. It was so fast he thought he imagined it. He quickly placed the helmet in the case and sealed the lid. The status light on the case glowed green. Containment was secure. He didn't tell the ship about the static shock. It was nothing. Just his nerves. When Jin returned to the Odyssey, the mood was tense. He placed the sealed case into the quarantine bay himself. The bay was a clear, thick-plastic box in the science lab. Once the case was inside, Sue sealed the outer door and activated the magnetic containment field. The helmet now sat in its case inside a clear box, surrounded by an invisible energy field. It looked small and isolated. The four of them stood looking at it through the clear wall. Sue, arms crossed. Hana, her face full of concern. Min, looking curious and technical. And Jin, who could not hide his excitement. It's just a helmet, Min said, breaking the silence. It's a history book, Jin corrected him. One we can finally read. Hana pointed to her medical scanner. I'm still reading that energy signature. It's very faint, but it's structured. It's not random. Can we access it? Jin asked, turning to Min. Without opening the box? A passive link? Min thought about it. Maybe. If it has an external data port, I could try to feed a tiny bit of power to it. Just enough to wake its memory core. We could try to download the data without activating the whole system. No, Sue said. We observe, we scan. We do not wake anything. Captain, Jin pleaded. This is a chance to hear a story from the past. To know what happened here. Why they all died. We have a duty to listen. Sue looked from Jin's eager face to the silent, worn helmet sitting in its triple-layered prison. It looked inert. Harmless. Just a piece of old metal. The silence on the ship was deep. It was the same heavy silence from the dead planet below, and in that silence the worn helmet waited. The silence on the Odyssey stretched for a long time after Captain Sue gave her order. The four of them just stood there looking at the helmet inside the quarantine bay. It was a strange object. The scars on its surface seemed to tell a story of their own, a story of violence and age. The dark visor hid nothing, yet felt like it was watching them. Jin could not take his eyes off it. For him, it was not just a piece of metal. It was a door, and behind that door was knowledge. He felt a pull towards it, a deep need to understand. He saw the caution on Sue's face and the worry on Hana's, but to him their fear was a wall blocking the way to the truth. "Captain," Jin said, his voice quiet but firm, "we have a responsibility. This is not just for us. This is for all of humanity, to know we are not alone, and to learn from those who came before us. What if they died from a disease? What if it was a natural disaster? What if it was a war? Knowing could save us. Not knowing could kill us." Sue did not look away from the helmet. She was a practical person. She thought about the safety of her ship and her crew. But Jin's words made sense. What if there was a threat here that they needed to understand? A threat that could follow them home? Hana spoke softly. "Jin's vital signs are normal. There is no sign of biological contamination from the artifact. The quarantine field is stable. From a medical standpoint, the physical risk seems low." "The risk isn't physical, Doc," Min said from the doorway. He had his own scanner pointed at the bay. "It's tech. That thing is putting out a complex energy pattern. It's like a computer that's been in sleep mode for 1,000,000 years. Waking it up, who knows what its programming does?" "We don't have to wake it up," Jin argued, turning to Min. "You said it yourself. A passive link. We give its memory bank the smallest trickle of power, just enough for it to say hello. We don't ask it to move or think or act. We just ask it to remember. And we record those memories from a safe distance." Sue finally turned away from the bay. She looked tired. The weight of command was heavy on her. "Explain the procedure, Min, in simple terms. What is the absolute minimum we can do?" Min put his scanner down. "Okay, think of the helmet as a dead phone. Its battery is stone dead, but the memory chip inside might still have data. If I can find a port on the outside of the case, I can connect a wire. I'll use a separate isolated power cell, one that has no connection to the Odyssey's main systems. I'll send a tiny, tiny jolt of electricity, just enough to power the memory chip for a few seconds. The data that comes out will be fed into our computer, but through a firewall. A digital wall. If there's any nasty code, it hits the wall and stops. We get the data, and the helmet goes back to sleep. It never even knows we were there. It sounded safe. It sounded controlled." Sue looked at each of her crew members. Jin was desperate. Hana was cautious but curious. Min was confident in his technical skills. "One attempt," Sue said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "The smallest possible power flow. The strongest possible firewall. The moment anything seems strange, you pull the plug. Is that clear to everyone?" They all nodded. The next few hours were spent in preparation. Min worked carefully, using robotic arms inside the quarantine bay to manipulate the case. He found a small, unusual port on the side of the helmet. It didn't match any known design. He built a custom connector. He set up the isolated power cell, no bigger than his thumb. He built the firewall, a separate computer that would take the first hit of any data. Jin and Hana watched from the lab, while Sue watched from the bridge on her screen. The mood was tense. It felt like they were trying to revive a ghost. "Ready," Min said, his hand hovering over a physical switch. The power cell was not connected to a voice command. It was a simple, old-fashioned switch he could flip off instantly. "Initiating connection in 3, 2, 1. He flipped the switch. For a second, nothing happened. Then a soft crimson light glowed from within the helmet's T-shaped visor. It was a dull, bloody red. It pulsed once, slowly, like a heartbeat. On the data screen, a waterfall of information began to scroll. It was not text. It was not numbers. It was a chaotic storm of raw sensory data. "It's working," Jin whispered, his eyes wide. And then the feed reached the firewall computer and was translated into a form their minds could understand. It was not a clean translation. It was a violent, overwhelming flood. A wave of heat and pressure hit them first. It was not real, but their brains felt it. It was the feeling of a world burning. They saw flashes of a sky that was not orange, but a sickly green, filled with dark, jagged shapes that were not clouds. They heard sounds, a high, piercing shriek that was not animal or machine, but something else, something that clawed at the mind. The images came faster. A city made of crystalline spires, shattered and melting, beings with too many limbs running, falling. The view was from the helmet's perspective. They were running too. They were fighting. A feeling of immense rage washed over them. It was a cold, focused anger, so powerful it felt like a physical force. It was not human anger. It was older and darker. It was the anger of something that had lost everything. "Pull the plug," Sue shouted from the bridge, her voice sharp with alarm. Min's hand slammed the switch to the off position. The crimson light in the helmet's visor died. The data stream on the screen stopped. The lab was silent again. The four of them were breathing heavily. Hana was pale, her hand over her heart. Min was staring at the now dark helmet, his confidence shaken. Jin was leaning on a console, his knuckles white. What was that?" Hana asked, her voice trembling. "It was a memory," Jin said, his own voice filled with a strange mix of horror and awe. The last memory of the being who wore that helmet. "We just saw the end of its world." "That wasn't just a memory," Min said, shaking his head. "That was a nightmare. That anger, I felt it. It was like a poison." On the bridge, Sue felt a cold knot in her stomach. She had seen the data feed on her screen, a distorted mess of light and sound. But she had also felt something, an echo of that terrible fury. "Report, is everyone okay? Hana vitals?" Hana quickly checked her medical scanners. Adrenaline spikes across the board. Elevated heart rates. But no physical harm. It was a psychological event. "It was a warning," Jin said, looking back at the helmet. "They weren't killed by a disease or an asteroid. They were killed. By something." And the last one standing, the one in the armor, was so angry. His rage is literally burned into that helmet. "That's enough," Sue said firmly. "The experiment is over. We have our data. We know what happened. They died in a war. We will analyze the recording from a safe distance." "No more direct links," everyone agreed. It was too intense, too dangerous to touch that mind again. But the connection, brief as it was, had left a mark. Later, as Jin tried to sleep, he saw the green sky and the melting spires. He felt the cold anger sitting in his stomach like a stone. He told himself it was just empathy. He had felt a ghost's pain. Min, down in engineering, found himself jumping at the normal sounds of his ship. The hum of the engine suddenly sounded like the low growl from the recording. He tightened a bolt with more force than necessary, his own frustration feeding on the echo of alien rage. Hana dreamed of the piercing shrieks and woke up sweating. She went to the lab to check the quarantine bay. The helmet sat there, dark and silent. It looked harmless, but she could not forget the feeling of pure hate that had washed over her. The Odyssey moved on, leaving the dead planet behind. They were headed home. For a day, things seemed normal. They began the long process of analyzing the downloaded data, using the firewall as a buffer, but the ghost was not done with them. It started with the lights. A faint flicker in the corridor near the lab. Min checked the power grid and found nothing wrong. Then the ship's computer began to act strangely. Simple calculations took longer. Screen displays would freeze for a second, then return to normal. "It's probably just a glitch from the data download," Min told Sue. "That firewall took a big hit. It might have caused some minor interference in our systems. I'll run a diagnostic." But the diagnostic found nothing. Jin, spending most of his time studying the cleaned-up data, started to change. He became more focused but also more withdrawn. He stopped eating with the crew. He spent hours in the lab just staring at the helmet. He said he was learning its language, understanding its pain. But his eyes had a new intensity, a hard light that Hana didn't like. One evening, Hana found him in the lab. He was not looking at the data screen. He was just standing before the quarantine bay, looking at the helmet. "Jin, you should get some rest," she said gently. He didn't turn. "It's not just a recording, Hana." "What do you mean?" "The anger. It's too precise, too focused. It's not the random emotion of a dying creature. It's a tool, a weapon." He finally looked at her and his eyes were unsettling. It didn't want us to feel sorry for it. It wanted us to understand what it was fighting, and it wanted us to be angry too. Hana felt a chill. "Jin, that's the helmet talking, not you. You need to step away." He smiled, but it wasn't his usual smile. It was a cold, thin line. "I'm fine. I'm just finally understanding." The whispers became a part of the ship. They were subtle, like a background noise you only hear when everything else is quiet. For a few days, the crew of the Odyssey tried to ignore the strange feelings and the small glitches. They were tired. The memory from the helmet had shaken them all. It was easy to blame their nerves, but Captain Sue was not convinced. She walked the corridors of her ship, her senses sharp. She noticed the way the light in the mess hall flickered just as Min was talking about a strange power drain. She saw how Hana jumped when a door slid closed too quickly. And she saw the most change in Jin. He lived in the lab now. His face was pale and his eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep. But those eyes burned with a fierce new energy. He had stopped talking about the tragedy of the dead race. Now he talked about their enemy. It wasn't a war, Captain, he said to her one morning, his voice low and intense. It was an eradication, a pest control. The thing that came for them. It didn't want their land or their resources. It just wanted them gone. Sue stood with her arms crossed, watching him. And how do you know that, Jin? The recording was chaotic. We saw only fragments. I've been piecing it together, he said, turning to his screen. He showed her complex patterns, maps of battles. The being in the helmet, its name is Kalen. That's the closest our language can get. It was a warrior, a protector. It watched its entire civilization be wiped out in a matter of days. Its rage isn't just anger. It's a purpose. It's the only thing it has left. Sue felt a coldness in her chest. Jin, you're referring to it in the present tense. It's dead. Its people are dust. We found their bones. Jin looked at her, and for a second she saw the old friend she knew. Then the hard light returned to his eyes. Is it? Its memory isn't. Its purpose isn't. It's waiting. Later that day, the nightmare stopped whispering and began to act. Min was in the engineering bay running another diagnostic. The power fluctuations were getting worse. A non-essential system, the long-range communication array, had suddenly drawn a huge surge of energy for a few seconds, then stopped. It made no sense. He opened the access panel to check the relays. As he did, the ship's internal comm system crackled to life. But it wasn't a voice. It was a sound. The same high-piercing shriek from the helmet's memory. It was deafening in the small space. Min cried out and dropped his tool, his hands flying to his ears. The sound was pure pain, drilled directly into his brain. It lasted for 3 seconds, then stopped as suddenly as it had begun. He leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his heart hammering. It was just a sound, he told himself. A recording played over the speakers. A prank, but his hands were shaking. The sound had felt like a needle in his mind. He marched straight to the bridge. Sue and Hana were there, looking pale. They had heard it too faintly from the corridors, that was it. The sound from the helmet, Min said, his voice tight. It came from the internal comms, Sue confirmed, her face grim. The system log shows the command originated from the lab. They all looked at each other. The lab where Jin was working. They found him still at his console. He seemed confused when they confronted him. I didn't do that, Jin said, looking genuinely surprised. Why would I? I was analyzing the acoustic patterns of the enemy's weaponry, see? He pointed to his screen, which showed sound wave graphs of the terrible shriek. Jin, the command came from here, Sue said firmly. It must have been a feedback loop, he insisted. The data is incredibly complex. It must have accidentally triggered a playback through the ship's system. Hana stepped forward, her medical scanner in hand. Jin, I need to check you, please. He pulled his arm away. I'm fine, Hana. I'm just focused. For the first time, I'm seeing things clearly. What things? Sue asked. How to fight, Jin said simply. He turned back to his screen, dismissing them. How to win. Sue knew then that it was beyond a simple glitch. She ordered Jin to leave the lab and rest in his quarters. He argued, but her command voice was absolute. He finally left, shooting them a look of resentment. With Jin gone, Sue, Hana, and Min gathered in the lab. The helmet sat in its bay, dark and silent. It's the helmet, Min said, his voice low. It's not just a memory. It's active. It's in our systems. It did that. It's affecting Jin, Hana added, her worry clear. His neural patterns are showing heightened aggression and obsessive focus. It's like the emotion from the recording has taken root in his mind. Sue made a decision. It was the decision she should have made back on the dead planet. We're jettisoning it now, Min. Prepare the airlock. We'll push the entire quarantine bay out into the void. It was the only way to be sure. Min nodded and hurried out to prepare the airlock controls. Sue began the procedure to disengage the magnetic seals on the quarantine bay. It was a complex process. They didn't hear Jin come in. He moved silently like a predator. In his hand, he held a heavy metal wrench from engineering. His eyes were fixed on Sue. Hana saw him first.
Jin, no!
He ignored her. He swung the wrench at the control panel for the quarantine bay. Sparks flew. Alarms blared. The disengagement sequence stopped. Sue turned, her eyes wide with shock. "Jin, stand down!" "You can't," he snarled. His voice was rough, different. It was his voice, but the hatred in it was not his. "You would throw away our only hope. Our only weapon. It's using you, Jin," Hana pleaded. "It's making me see," he shouted back. He advanced on Sue. "We are weak. Our people are soft. We explore and we talk. They knew how to fight. They knew how to make their enemies burn. We need that knowledge. At what cost?" Sue demanded, standing her ground. "Any cost." Jin screamed, and he lunged at her. He was stronger than he should have been. He slammed into her, and they both fell to the floor. The wrench clattered away. Sue was a trained officer, but Jin fought with a frantic, wild strength. He was trying to get his hands around her throat. Hana didn't hesitate. She grabbed a hypospray from her medical kit, set it to a strong sedative, and rushed forward. She jammed it into Jin's neck. He roared, a sound of pure fury, and threw an arm back, sending Hana stumbling away. But the drug was fast-acting. His movements became sluggish. His grip on Sue loosened. His eyes, filled with that alien rage, fluttered closed, and he collapsed to the side. Sue scrambled back, gasping for air. Her throat was bruised. She looked at Jin's unconscious form, a deep sorrow in her heart. Her friend was gone, replaced by this thing. Min came running back in. "The airlock is ready. What happened?" He saw Jin on the floor and Sue rubbing her neck. "The helmet happened," Sue said, her voice hoarse. "It's fighting back. Help me get him to the med bay. Then we get rid of that thing." Together they carried Jin to the medical room and secured him to a bed. Hana administered a stronger sedative to keep him under. Then they returned to the lab. The quarantine bay was still sealed, but the control panel was destroyed. They couldn't disengage it remotely. "We'll have to do it manually," Min said. "I can go into the service crawl space and release the physical clamps. Then you can trigger the emergency jettison from the bridge." It was dangerous. The crawl space was tight and isolated. "Do it," Sue said. Min grabbed his tools and disappeared into a panel in the wall. Sue went to the bridge. She opened a channel to Min's suit comm. "I'm at the primary clamp," his voice came through, slightly distorted. "It's unstuck. The mechanism is fused. It's like something welded it from the inside." "Try the secondary," Sue instructed, a feeling of dread growing. A moment of silence. Then, "Captain, the secondary is the same. And the tertiary, it's impossible. It's like the bay doesn't want to let go." As Min spoke, Sue watched her main screen. The view was of the stars ahead. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The stars vanished. In their place was a single clear image. It was a view from a scanner. It showed a planet, a beautiful blue and green world, much like Earth. It was a pre-FTL civilization with no space travel, no advanced weapons. A soft, easy target. The image zoomed in on a continent, then a city. Simple structures, peaceful. Then over the image, a targeting reticule appeared. It was the same design as the one from the helmet's memory. It locked onto the city. A single word appeared on the screen in stark red letters. It was not a human word. It was the name of the enemy from the memory, the one who had destroyed Kalen's world. The message was clear. The nightmare had found a new enemy, and it was showing them its first target. The image of the peaceful alien world hung on the main screen for a full minute. The red targeting site was a promise of destruction. Captain Sue stared, her blood running cold. This was no longer about their ship. This was about an entire world, innocent and unaware. Then the screen flickered and returned to the normal star field. The bridge was silent. Sue slammed her hand on the comms. "Min, get out of there now! It's not just about us anymore. It's planning an attack," Min's voice came back, tight with fear. "Understood. The clamps are completely fused. I can't move them. I'm coming out." Sue turned to Hana on the bridge. "Can you wake Jin? We need to know what it's thinking. We need to understand its plan." Hana looked doubtful. "He's dangerously unstable, Captain. The entity has a strong hold on him. We have no choice," Sue said. "We need any advantage we can get." Down in the med bay, Hana carefully administered a counteragent. Jin's eyes fluttered open. For a moment he was confused himself. He saw the restraints and tried to sit up. "What happened? Why am I tied down?" "You attacked the captain, Jin," Hana said softly. The thing in the helmet, it used you. Jin's face fell as memories flooded back. Shame washed over him. I couldn't stop it. The anger. It felt so right. It felt like justice. He looked at Hana, his eyes clear for the first time in days. I'm sorry. Sue's voice came over the medbay speaker. Jin, we don't have time for apologies. The entity is active. It just showed us a target. A planet. It's going to attack. Jin's body went rigid. The clarity in his eyes flickered, replaced by a hard, cold focus. The Varel, he said, his voice dropping. That is their name. The enemy. Jin, stay with us, Hana urged. How is it going to attack? We have no weapons that can do that. It doesn't need our weapons, Jin said, his voice becoming distant as if listening to a far-off song. It needs our voice. The long-range comm array. It's going to use it. On the bridge, Sue understood immediately. The power surge Min had detected. The entity wasn't going to fire a missile. It was going to broadcast a signal. Oh, weaponized memory. The same screaming rage and horror that had infected them, but amplified and directed at an entire planet. A psychological plague that would drive a peaceful species mad, turning them against each other, destroying their civilization from within. Min, Sue yelled. The comm array. Disable it now. Min was already running through the corridors toward the communications hub. On my way. Jin's voice, now laced with the entity's cold logic, came through the speaker. It's too late. The sequence is already programmed. It will use the ship's power to send the signal. You cannot stop it. You can only watch. Fight it, Jin. Hana pleaded, holding his arm. He looked at her, and a war was happening behind his eyes. It's so loud, he whispered, pain in his voice. Min reached the comm hub. The door was locked. He used his engineering override, and the door slid open. The room was humming with power. The main transmitter was active, lights blinking in a complex alien pattern. He drew his cutting tool and moved to the main power conduit. A spark of electricity shot from the panel, arcing through the air and striking his hand. He cried out and dropped the tool. It wasn't a random spark. It was a targeted defense. A synthesized voice filled the room, coming from the speakers. It was a flat, horrible imitation of Jin's voice. Do not interfere. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Sue tried to shut down the array from her command console. Access denied. The entity had locked her out. Every system she tried to access, weapons, navigation, life support, was under its control. The Odyssey was no longer their ship. Min, report. Sue called. It's defending itself. Min shouted over the comms. The sound of another electrical arc sizzling in the background. I can't get near the main power. Sue made a desperate decision. Hana, bring Jin to the bridge. Maybe seeing us, hearing us can help him fight. Hana released Jin's restraints and helped him up. He was unsteady, his mind a battlefield. They moved slowly through the ship. As they passed the lab, Jin stopped, his eyes drawn to the quarantine bay. The helmet inside was dark. Kalen, Jin whispered. Is that its name? Hana asked. It was, Jin said. Now it's just the Fury. It has no other purpose. They reached the bridge. Sue saw the struggle on Jin's face. Jin, you have to help us. How do we stop the broadcast? Jin leaned against a console, gripping it until his knuckles were white. The signal, it needs a focus. A mind to fine-tune the hatred. It's using me. My brain patterns are the template. He looked at Sue, his eyes wide with horror. It's why I can't think. It's pulling on my thoughts. An idea, terrible and swift, formed in Sue's mind. If it doesn't have a focus, if the template is gone, you'd have to kill me, Jin said, understanding immediately. Hana stepped between them. No, there has to be another way. Suddenly, Jin gasped and clutched his head. It's starting. The power buildup is beginning. The broadcast in 3 minutes. On the main screen, the image of the blue-green planet reappeared. A countdown timer appeared in the corner. 2:59, 02:58. Min ran onto the bridge, his hand burned. I can't stop it. The whole section is electrified. Sue looked from the countdown to Jin's tortured face. They were out of options. Jin looked at Hana, then at Sue. In his eyes, the real Jin, her friend, was there, clear and determined. Do it, he said to Sue. It's the only way to save them. He pointed a trembling finger at the screen, at the world full of innocent lives. No, Jin, we can... Hana started. There's no time. Jin yelled, his body trembling with the effort of holding the entity back. Captain, now. Sue's hand went to the stun pistol at her hip. Her heart was a stone in her chest. She drew it. She aimed it at Jin. Tears streamed down Hana's face. Min looked away, unable to watch. The countdown hit 02. Jin gave a small, sad smile. Tell my family I was trying to do the right thing. Sue's finger tightened on the trigger, but Jin's eyes suddenly rolled back into his head. He convulsed and collapsed to the floor. The entity, sensing the threat to its template, had severed the conscious connection, plunging him into a protective coma. The countdown continued. 1:45. It's too late, Min whispered, his voice hollow. Sue stood frozen, the stun pistol hanging uselessly in her hand. They had lost. They were going to be the unwilling architects of a genocide. Then Hana's medical training took over. She knelt by Jin, checking his pulse. It was erratic but strong. She looked at his face, peaceful now in his forced sleep. An idea, a crazy, desperate idea sparked in her mind. It's using his awake mind, his conscious thoughts, she said, looking up at Sue. But his subconscious is still his. If we can't remove the template, we have to change it. How? Sue demanded. Emotion, Hana said, scrambling to her feet. The entity uses hate and rage. We have to flood the connection with the opposite. We have to give it something else to broadcast. The countdown hit 01 now. What opposite? Min asked, confused. Help me get him to the lab, Hana shouted, already pulling on Jin's arms. Without questioning, Sue and Min grabbed Jin and carried him, running back toward the lab. They laid him on the floor in front of the quarantine bay. The helmet sat inside, and now, a low red pulse was coming from its visor, matching the rhythm of the countdown. Sure 30. Hurry, Hana, Sue urged. Hana placed her hands on Jin's head. She closed her eyes, ignoring the panic, pushing away her fear. She thought of her family on Earth. She thought of laughing with Jin and Min over a meal. She thought of the beauty of a sunset, the kindness of a stranger, the love for her child. She focused every bit of her being on feelings of peace, of love, of hope. She poured these feelings, a silent, powerful prayer, towards Jin's mind. Tantin. The red pulse from the helmet began to flicker. The entity sensed the interference. It was a virus in its pure stream of hatred. Sue and Min, understanding, placed their hands on Jin too. Sue thought of her crew, her duty to protect them. Min thought of the simple joy of fixing something broken. They added their own strength to Hana's, a wave of human feeling against a universe of hate. 01. The countdown reached 0. A massive power surge drained the ship's lights for a second. The long-range array fired. On the bridge, the screen showed the signal, an invisible wave of energy, shooting out toward the innocent planet. They waited, holding their breath. Nothing happened. The planet continued to turn, serene and untouched. There were no explosions, no screams. The signal had been sent, but its message had been changed. Inside the quarantine bay, the helmet's red light did not go out. It turned a soft, gentle blue. For a single, fleeting second, the image of a crystalline city, whole and beautiful, flickered over its surface. It was a memory of home, not of its death. A memory of peace. Then the blue light faded. The helmet became just a piece of old, worn metal once more. The entity was gone. Its last weapon had been turned into a lullaby. In the lab, Jin took a deep, shuddering breath and opened his eyes. They were clear. He was himself again. He looked at his friends, at their tired, tear-streaked faces, and he knew what they had done. You saved me, he whispered. No, Jin, Hana said, squeezing his hand. You saved them. The silence on the Odyssey was different now. It was not the heavy silence of the grave or the tense silence of fear. It was the quiet of exhaustion, of a storm that has finally passed. The ship's systems slowly returned to normal. The light stabilized. The hum of the engine was once again a comforting sound. Jin, Hana, Min, and Captain Sue sat together in the mess hall. No one spoke for a long time. They just drank water and looked at each other, confirming with their own eyes that they were all still there, and that they were themselves. Finally, Sue broke the silence. Is it gone? Jin closed his eyes for a moment, looking inward. The constant pressure in his mind, the whisper of cold fury, was absent. There was only a quiet emptiness.
Yes, he said.
It's gone. The last of it was in that signal. When we changed the message, it had nothing left to hold on to. What did we send to that planet? Min asked, his voice rough. We sent them a memory of peace, Hana said softly. A memory of a home from a being who had lost everything. It was a warning, but a gentle one. A story about what happens when hate wins. They will probably just think it was a strange cosmic signal, Jin added. A mystery. But they will not be harmed. Sue nodded, a deep weariness in her bones. They had won, but it felt less like a victory and more like a narrow escape from a terrible cliff. The next few days were spent on repairs and reports. Min worked to purge any lingering traces of the alien code from the ship's computers. It was a slow process, like cleaning a house after a fire, looking for every last ember. Hana monitored Jin closely. He was physically recovering, but the psychological scars were deep. He had nightmares. Sometimes he would wake up, his heart pounding, the echo of a green sky and a piercing shriek fading from his memory. She stayed with him, talking to him, reminding him of who he was. Sue began writing her official log. She tried to find the words to explain what had happened, how a piece of old metal had almost used them to destroy a world. She knew that no one would truly understand. They would see the data, but they would not feel the terror, the all-consuming rage. 1 week after the event, they held a meeting on the bridge. The course was set for home. We have to decide what to do with it, Sue said, gesturing towards the lab. They all knew what it was. We can't bring it back, Min said firmly. No one can ever be allowed to study it. It's too dangerous. I agree, said Hana. It's a weapon. A loaded gun. We got lucky. The next person might not. They all looked at Jin. He was the one who had brought it on board. He was the one who had been closest to it. Jin stared at the star chart on the main screen. Min is right. It's a weapon, but it's also a grave. The being inside Kalen, he was a victim first. He deserved to be remembered not as a monster, but as a protector who failed. So what do we do? Sue asked. We give it a burial, Jin said. A proper one. In the void. We send it into a star. Let it be purified by fire. Let it finally rest. It was the right thing to do. They all felt it. The preparations were simple. They moved the entire quarantine bay, with the helmet still inside, to the main airlock. There were no ceremonies, no words. They stood together in the airlock corridor, looking at the bay through the thick window. Sue placed her hand on the control. Ready? Everyone nodded. She pressed the button. The outer door slid open with a hiss. The air in the lock rushed out into the vacuum, a brief, silent storm. The quarantine bay, pushed by mechanical arms, floated out into the blackness. They watched on the screen as it drifted away from the Odyssey, a small box becoming smaller and smaller against the endless sea of stars. It was a lonely sight. Sue initiated a short, programmed engine burn. The Odyssey moved away, leaving the artifact behind. On the screen, a yellow star grew larger. It was a small, stable sun, alone in a quiet sector. The quarantine bay drifted into the star's corona. For a moment, it was a dark speck against the immense fire. Then it was gone, vaporized, turned to atoms. The nightmare was over. The mood on the ship lightened after that. It was as if a shadow had been lifted. They began to talk about home, about seeing their families, about eating real food. But the experience had changed them. Min would sometimes stop what he was doing and just listen, making sure the ship's sounds were normal. Hana found she was more patient, more appreciative of the small, quiet moments. Sue became more cautious, her trust in technology tempered by a new respect for the unknown. And Jin? He spent his time differently. He stopped his obsessive research. Instead, he started a new project. He began to write. He wrote down everything he could remember from the entity's memories. Not the battles, not the hate. He wrote about Kalen's people, their art, their music, their culture, the way their cities looked in the sunlight, the stories they told their children. He was building them a memorial made of words. He was ensuring that they were remembered for how they lived, not for how they died. One evening, as the Odyssey sailed smoothly through a peaceful nebula, painting the viewports in shades of purple and blue, the four of them were on the bridge. It's beautiful, Hana said, looking out at the cosmic clouds. It is, Jin agreed. He was quiet for a moment. You know, the entity was wrong. About what? Min asked. It said the galaxy never stood a chance, Jin said. It believed that its enemy was unstoppable. That hate was the most powerful force. But it wasn't, Sue said. No, Jin replied, looking at his friends. It wasn't, we proved that. It wasn't a weapon or a battle that stopped it. It was you. It was Hana's hope and Min's loyalty and your strength, Captain. It was us, he was right. The entity, born from a war that wiped out a civilization, had never understood the power of cooperation, of empathy, of love. It saw those things as weaknesses. But in the end, those were the only things that could defeat it. The Odyssey continued its journey. It was just one small ship in the vast darkness, but inside it carried a profound truth, a truth that a long-dead warrior in a worn helmet could never have understood. The galaxy was full of dangers. There were ancient horrors sleeping in the dust and terrors waiting in the dark. But there was also something else. There was humanity, not perfect, not always strong, but capable of great kindness. And when faced with a nightmare, they did not stand alone. They stood together, and that was a force the galaxy had never seen coming.